Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this interactive conversation with Julia Moore and Bruce and yourself today. Today, we are talking about loss and more specifically, how to deal with it in this season. Now, we've titled this thing, Making Our Way Through the Jungle of Loss. Now, a jungle can be messy. There are no clear paths in a jungle, and it's easy to feel lost as you make your way, or as you try and find your way. Now, loss is something we all experience. Loss is not only about the death of a loved one, it's also about anything we feel we have lost in the journey of life. Now, this past few months, as we've all experienced, we've seen a lot of loss through isolation and the effect on us. Now, the important thing is how we have dealt with that loss and how and its effect on us. Now, how we handle loss determines a great deal about our spiritual, mental, and physical well-being. Now, you all know that last night and this morning, we sent out a Google form with a whole bunch of topics that we would have liked you guys to engage with and ask questions. And in that poll, we've ranked the top results, feedback from you guys. And we fortunately have Julia and Bruce today live with us to engage in these questions and the most popular questions that you guys had. Now, the purpose of these types of gatherings is that they are live and interactive. Now, we want you to get some courage and on the YouTube chats on the side, ask questions. As you hear Bruce and Julia speaking, as God brings something up in your heart, and it's a question you have on loss, please, we want you to ask the questions live. And as the questions come through, we'll be able to ask Bruce and Julia to give their thoughts or God's heart on the matter. Now, before we start with that, firstly, we want to just enter into a time of worship. So I would ask you to please turn up your sound, fill the room with the worship, and let's meaningfully engage God, who is Lord of all.
Good morning, El Shaddai. Just want to encourage you let's stand together. Just turn on your sound system, maybe put it a bit louder. And let's worship Jesus together this morning. Yes, Father, we just come to you and we just thank you for Jesus, who you've sent, that we can know that the world in which we live, that is so broken, that is in so much strife and turmoil, that Jesus is our answer. So Lord, we just thank you that you are with us now. We thank you for your presence, Lord. We thank you for your presence, Holy Spirit. And we choose to enthrone Jesus right here, right now. Do you feel the world is broken? We do. Do you feel the shadows deepen? We do. But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. Do you wish that you could see it all made new? We do. Is all creation groaning? It is. Is a new creation coming? It is. Is the glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst? It is. Is it good that we remind ourselves of this? It is. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave, he is is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy of this? He is. Does the Father truly love us? He does. Does the Spirit move among us? He does. And does Jesus our Messiah hold forever those he loves? He does. Does our God intend to dwell again with us? He does. Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. From every people and tribe, from every nation and tongue, he has made us the kingdom and priests to God, to reign with his Son. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? Is he worthy of this? He is, he is, he is, he is worthy, he is worthy of all blessing and honor and glory. He is, he is, he is, he is, he is worthy, he is worthy of all blessing and honor and glory. He is worthy, he is worthy, he is worthy of this. He is. You are worthy, 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 Lord. We give you all the glory. We bow before your throne, Jesus. You are worthy, and we love you. Have your way, Lord. Oh, we love you, Jesus.
Thank you, Andre and Jenny, for the worship, and welcome back, everyone. Today is live and interactive, and just as we did with you 2 weeks ago, would love you guys to just engage with us on the YouTube chat function. Ask any questions as something comes into your heart, whatever God's saying, whatever question you have. Please, guys, get it going, get asking the questions, have some courage. And today we're dealing with the subject of loss with Julia, Moore, and Bruce. And in addition to this, we're going to ask throughout the course of this the questions that are most answered on the poll, and any live questions that you guys have coming through that I will direct straight to Julia or to Bruce. Now, I want to just begin with introducing Julia Moore. Julia, Glenn, and her family have been with El Shaddai for a long time. And about 12 years ago, Julia decided to join a family center helping out in the area of grief and loss. Now, Julia, won't you tell us a bit about yourself and why you got into helping people in this way?
Hello, Tyron, and hello, Bruce, and hello to all the El Shaddai family. So what happened was about 12 or 13 years ago, a very good friend of mine lost her father and father-in-law, and she was struggling to deal with the loss, and I was struggling to help her. I really, really wanted to be a good friend, but I didn't know what to do or what to say. And then coincidentally, the two of us went on a pastoral care course. And in that process, I learned how to care for her, and she learned how to process her grief. And what the salient thing that we learned was that actually loss needs work, grief needs work, and we learned how to find out what that work was. Grief is not something, or loss is not something that you can just move around or get over. You need to work through it, and so we learned how to do that. So I approached Bruce and offered my services, and so we started the Grief Share program, which we ran for quite a few years, and that's morphed into a sort of, under the Family Care Centre, a counselling service that we offer to anybody, not only in the church, but anybody is welcome to come, and we deal with people one-on-one, and obviously we have courses for groups and so on, and that's what we do.
Thanks, and just thank you for being here. And Bruce, I want to ask you, why this topic of loss?
Thanks, Tyron, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, we've noticed, just as this time has gone on over 100 days now, that some of the conversations that we're having and some of the work that we're doing often becomes a conversation around loss, what people are feeling and how they are interacting with some of the realities of just this whole period. Now, loss is a very important subject to talk about, and it's a very broad subject. But today we're not going to focus specifically on the loss that comes through death, but rather the loss that we're experiencing through the strictures that have been placed on us as a result of the pandemic. And just to give you a few examples of some of the things that we're seeing and talking about, the loss of independence. We just can't move around like we used to. A big one is the loss of social interactions. Some people have actually found this quite crippling, the effect of isolation on their hearts and their lives. Loss of confidence is another one that you see quite often. Some very practical ones, like the loss of jobs and the loss of income, is a reality. The loss that's caused by social distancing. I was in Pick n Pay recently, and in the queue going out to the checkout, and I didn't stand on the line, and the lady in front of me turned around to me and gave me a real workover and told me to move back and move out of her space, and you know, that's just one of the losses that we're experiencing right now. I've had a particularly soft spot for the matrics and those who are in their first year at university, the college students. They've experienced real loss this year. Matrics who just haven't had the opportunity to do what they want to do in their final year, and obviously first year university students, and equally so the kids that are going back to school at the moment. They're experiencing loss. It's just not like it was. The whole environment is differently. So loss is a massive subject. I'm sure Julia can add many more examples, but we are experiencing loss at the moment. It's not business as usual. Some people say, no, they're just going on as they always used to. Maybe they are, but my suspicion is that they're just not self-aware of this reality, because it is something that we all have to face in this season.
Thanks for that, Bruce. Julia, now with your experience in this field and been going through it for the last 12 years, can I ask you to just expand on this a bit and perhaps also speak about the impact and effects that loss will have on a person in this season?
Thanks, Tyron. So for me, the greatest loss has been my loss of routine. I'm a reasonably organized person, and I go to gym at this time, I drop my kids at that time, I fetch them at this time, I have a certain routine. Sundays, I go to church. So that's been very difficult because there's like a whole lot of balls in the air, and a lot of my life has come back, but it has to be handled with a whole lot of more things. So I can't just pop out to the shops anytime. There's a whole mask changeover, cleaning, sanitizing routine. So everything is different, but the expectations are also the same on myself. But also there's a loss of a sort of a bigger routine in that I don't know what I'm doing for Christmas. I don't know about what my children are going to do next year in terms of, going to university or going the next step. So like for children, you can't say that this is going to be over in 10 sleeps or in 100 sleeps. We just don't know. So that's why I've called this topic moving through the jungle, because there's no beginning and end to this. We didn't even know it was a beginning when it did. There's no map, and there's no street signs to tell us what to do. So it can be a maddening experience. It can be very disorientating. And sometimes we get ambushed along the way. A gorilla jumps out from behind the bush, which is like something that we didn't expect. Somebody gets sick, or like our geyser burst in the middle of lockdown, and you've got to have a plumber in the house, and now what do we do? And then there's no water, and the money wasn't in the budget. All those things are like ambush things. And then sometimes when we're going through this, we are working at it and we are doing it, but we might find we've turned off into a cul-de-sac and we hit a dead end. And then we actually have to reverse out and move on again. Other times we might meet somebody along the way, just serendipitously, who just feeds into our life and just spurs us on, and we've got to grab hold of that and move with that. The most important thing is to keep moving in a sense of I'm getting through this, and keep working at what you're doing, and find things that you can do that helps you move through this, so that we get to a point where at the end, where we feel that we realize that we're better off than when we started.
It's incredible insight there, just around the whole, even your routine being lost is loss itself, and it affects you emotionally and stuff. So thanks for that. And now, Bruce, if you could please put this into a biblical context for us as we go forward.
Yeah, I think it's really important just to shape this around our faith and what have you. And a key scripture for that is from John chapter 16, verse 33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, for I have overcome the world. This is really a very key verse in this sense, that we are never promised a trouble-free life by Jesus. And we have to understand that. In fact, there are times when following Jesus demands more of us and brings greater complexities and troubles in certain circumstances. And if you just take a moment and you overview the New Testament, you'll see many points of loss that come through. For example, the disciples would have struggled with the loss of Jesus. They fled. And then the other day I was reading this verse from Acts chapter 20, when Paul says farewell to the people in Ephesus. When he had said this, he knelt down with all of them and prayed. They all wept as they embraced him and kissed him. What grieved them most was his statement that they would never see his face again. And then they accompanied him to the ship. And so what we see just in this verse alone is that there was a real loss going on, and they were in going through that process of grief at the loss of Paul there. Mary experienced loss. You can follow that through her story. But ultimately, it was Jesus who experienced the greatest loss of all. He died alone on the cross. A loss that some people are experiencing when their loved ones go to ICU in this season across South Africa and have to be alone without any kind of family or friends. And it's the reality that it's part of living that includes loss. And we're not excluded because of our faith. We are human. But as followers of Jesus, we are given a peace In every situation, it is there to sustain us. And perhaps the most relevant verse around that is from Philippians, when Paul, written from jail, remember, says that the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And we can call upon that in this season as we deal with the reality of loss. And then just to remind you of another huge concept that really probably needs a time on its own, but God always uses troubles and difficulties to mature us, to mold our character for our good and for his glory. He does not send troubles, but he uses them to those who surrender themselves to him. And of course, the best example of this is Joseph himself, where he concludes after his time in prison and the loss that he would have experienced there, just the loss of his youth alone. And he concludes, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And without taking any more time, you can find similar messages in Romans chapter 8, James chapter 1. But here's the point. We don't avoid troubles. We don't pretend that they're not real. We don't say things like, there is no loss for me in this season, just because we're Christian and we're somehow immune to it. We have to get to the place where we use loss, where we use troubles for our good and for his glory. And that's the key point today.
Thanks, Bruce, for that. And now, Julia, it's obvious and clear from what we've just discussed that we've all dealt with loss in this season. Every single person listening and everyone in the world would have in the last few months dealt with loss. Now, how do we deal with loss in a healthy way?
Right, there's quite a few things, few aspects. First of all, just to echo what Bruce said, loss is normal. And it's no use, sometimes we feel as Christians, we've always got to be, sunshine and light. We're not little cherubs plucking harps on a cloud. God's got those. We're down here, and we are living out our lives, and we need to live them out in a way that's pleasing to God, but also that God can use us. We need to improve ourselves so that we can reach out to other people. So pretending that you're fine is not helpful. It sucks, and it's okay just to say, I hate this. That's fine. So firstly, we need to find healthy ways to comfort and soothe ourselves. So, drinking a double whiskey or eating a whole chocolate cake is not really very helpful. It might make you feel better for 5 minutes, but then you're going to feel sick and maybe your clothes won't fit you so well. But you can find other ways to make yourself feel better. And for everybody, it's different. And it's important to find something that works for you. So it could be committing to a daily quiet time, just spending some time alone with God and sort of quietening yourself and centering yourself with God. It could be listening to soothing music. It could be walking in nature. It could be, for me, I like to do something creative. So something that absorbs me, but that I make something beautiful, like I knit or I make a cake and I give it to my neighbors, and their joy fills me with joy. So those kind of things are therapeutic, and it's important to do them. It's also important to perhaps write them down so that when you are feeling overwhelmed, you can actually just access your list and go and do one of those things. Secondly, you need to analyze your loss. So for instance, a major loss would be having lost your job. Now that is a huge loss, but you can help deal with the loss by dividing it into primary and secondary losses. So losing your job would be a primary loss, but secondary losses would be something like the fellowship of the people at work. You don't see them anymore. The nice cup of coffee that you got on the corner near work. The saying hello to the security guard. Maybe for us girls, we like to get dressed up. Maybe getting dressed up every day and going to work. All those things are losses, and it's important if you can enumerate them, because then you can deal with them. You can actually see them, and then they become easier to deal with. The problem is not so overwhelming. And then the third thing is to be honest with God. God knows exactly where each of us are, but we need to engage with God. We need to be honest with him and say how we feel. And only when we can verbalize that to God can he help us. Some people in this time struggle to have a quiet time and struggle to pray and don't know what to say, and they feel very far from God. And that's okay. We mustn't beat ourselves up and feel like we're bad Christians because we can't find God. But we can do that by, for instance, by using the Psalms. You know, there are many, many Psalms, and each one is written in a time of joy or a time of trial. And we can read through the Psalms and find a Psalm that echoes how we're feeling in that moment. And we can read out that Psalm to God. And we can say, God, this is how I'm feeling. And then we must be expectant of God to be there for us, to help us. He's not necessarily going to give us a job or just address that direct loss, but he will be there to comfort us, to soothe us, and to meet our needs. And we need to be expectant of that.
Thank you. And Bruce, before we go to the live questions and the poll questions, can you just add any more insights?
Yeah, I want to just pick up briefly on what Julia said about the Psalms. They're just such a key part of the process. And my mind immediately goes to Psalm 23, that very well-known Psalm. And in verse 4, it says there, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And in terms of handling loss, before we handle the live questions here, there's just a couple of wonderful principles, just two wonderful principles in this verse alone. Firstly, it says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, or the shadow of loss, if we put it into this context. So the point is, keep walking. You may not be able to run, but keep walking. Sitting down or trying to sleep through loss will not get you through it. You have to keep walking. And the second thing, it says the valley of the shadow. Now, if there's a shadow, there has to be a light from behind. That's what creates the shadow. So turn around for a moment and look at the light. The light is there. Draw encouragement that the light is with you. You are not alone. Feel the warmth of the light. Feel your hope rising. And then go back to point one. Keep walking. And so in that context, just remember, we don't walk alone. We walk with a trusted friend. Somebody we can call on to encourage us. We are a trusted friend to somebody else, and we keep walking.
Thanks, Bruce and Julia, just for getting the ball rolling on this whole topic. Now, we have a question from someone watching, and the question is, and Julia, I'm going to ask you to answer this, is that the question is, how do you engage with a person who does not realize they are in the process of grief, i.e. they are not able to feel their emotions?
Gosh, Tara, that's a difficult one. I think what's important, I think in my experience, people feel very awkward around people that are suffering, and they don't know what to do. And they feel that they've got to have this pearl of wisdom that they've got to have, and they feel inadequate because they don't. I think the most important thing is just to pitch up. It's just to be there and not give advice, but sometimes be quiet and let that person talk to you. So it's also quite difficult to be quiet, but just to be there, maybe go for a walk with that person, maybe just watch a TV program with that person, just drive somewhere, I don't know, just to be with that person and give the person your total acceptance and unjudgmental. People sort of clam up if you're sort of there, with all these hot points that you're going to give them to rescue them. So I think the first thing is just to pitch up, and then through this, maybe you get some advice, but the best thing is just to be there and just walk alongside them.
Okay, and then Julia, I just want to stay with you because you touched on this question earlier. Now, our highest answered question on the poll was, how do I care for myself in this season? It was the most asked for question by the El Shaddai community. Now, you have touched on this bits in your previous answers, but if you can just expand a bit on how do I care for myself in this season?
Okay, so we are all important, we are all important to God, and we all have a role to fill. And I think in this season, a lot of people are feeling very what's the word, in pieces, because their routine is gone, their expectations are different, and they want to be there for their children and for their partners and for their parents who are in isolation and for their other people that are suffering. So they're feeling very stressed about how to meet all those needs. So it is important to care for yourself. And that's what I touched on earlier about finding ways to soothe yourself. It's also important to monitor yourself. So monitor your behavior. So maybe stand back and see how many times did I lose my temper today? Maybe I'm just lying and staring at the wall all day. What is my behavior, and how has it changed? Or, just to get a little bit of an objective view and perhaps confide in somebody. What do you think? Get some advice from other people. So there's a number of ways and do it, but it is important to vote for yourself. It is important to say, to make sure that you look after yourself so that you can look after other people. So you need to get enough sleep. You need to eat healthily. You need to get some exercise. You need to focus on good things, beautiful scene or a lovely music or all those things. It's important to do those things for yourself and just spend a little bit of time every day. And obviously, especially spending time with God. And, in this time, perhaps we don't have our normal going to church or cell groups or whatever. So we need to find other ways of engaging with God. So, for instance, I've stopped listening to talk. I normally listen to the radio in the car, and I hear all the news, and it's just COVID. And you can listen to it, and you can get completely freaked out, and we're all going to die. We're going to hell in a handbasket. It's terrible. But I've stopped doing that now, and I've put beautiful music in my car. So I listen to classical music, and I listen to beautiful worship music, Casting Crowns, and those sort of things, and I feel much better. So take myself for a drive, when I'm going to the stressful shops or when I'm going to fetch my children from school, whatever, then at least I've got that little time, which I wouldn't normally have done. I would have done something else, but now that's what I'm doing. So it's good to find other ways of soothing yourself.
Can I just jump in here as well, Taryn?
Yeah.
Is that I think there's two scriptures that are key here. The one is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. And the other one is in Philippians, look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of the other. So there's a double-edged sword here around self-care. We do have to learn to love ourselves. That's called self-care. If we don't love ourselves, there's no ways we can love a neighbor. And equally, if we love our neighbors without loving ourselves, we're going to also create some, a problem there. So here's the deal around self-care. It's both. It's looking after yourself and looking after your neighbor. In other words, somebody who only looks after themselves and is never concerned about their neighbor, that's a problem. And somebody who is looking after a neighbor the whole time, but never looking after themselves, that's a problem as well. So the two run together, and that's what makes a healthy person. So yeah, we do need strategies, or we need plans that work for ourselves, that allow us to care for ourselves, so that we can care for a neighbor, and vice versa. The two are important.
Bruce, I'm gonna stick with you for this next question, and the next question is also from our live YouTube chats. It's just come through now. And this is a question that I think has come through nearly every single time we've had a live interactive chat. And now this is specifically in the context of loss. The question is, I really miss face-to-face discussions and hugging people. Any advice, please? And it's in the context because this is a loss we're dealing with.
Well, it's really hard to comment on that loss in the sense of face-to-face and hugging. I think there's still a way to go before we're going to be able to interact in that way. Can I put it into a biblical context here that has been really helpful to me right now and that is Joseph. There was a guy that had extreme loss, to the point where he was in prison, and he lost basically his whole youth. He never thought he was lied about. He lost his reputation. The loss that went around that guy is absolutely key to studying in this point of view. And there are certain things I notice in that story on the way he handled his loss. Number one, he never forgot the promise of God over his life. Because we know that because of when he came out, he was ready and prepared for that. And so one of the key things I want to say to you in this season is do not forget the promises of God over your life. And secondly, the loss of being in prison with your reputation damaged as well must have been enormous. But he managed in that process to keep a relationship with God. We know that because he was still able to interpret dreams accurately. He was still in touch with heaven, that he was able to take dreams and interpret them. In other words, you can lose your external world, but you don't need to lose your internal world. Your internal world is your choice. Even if the external things are taken away from you, like hugging, like social interaction, that doesn't mean your whole world has to implode. We don't see that in Joseph or Paul for that matter around that. The third thing that we know about Joseph is that he was completely committed to advancing the kingdom, because when he came out with the view of and given the task of political leadership or governance. That's a huge kingdom project. So I want to say to those of you who are going through loss, you remember that the kingdom of God is always advancing, even through a pandemic. Otherwise, we end up getting wrapped up in a small world of what's COVID doing to us. And that is not healthy for self-care. You need to keep a view of the kingdom advancing in this stage. And then lastly, there is a timing thing here. If you're struggling with the hugging, with the social interaction and what have you, there's a timing thing. It's not forever. And we have to keep our mind on the fact that it is a season, but it is not forever. Joseph is a key person just to go and reread in this period of time.
Thanks for that, Bruce. Now, Julia, I want to move on to you for this next question from someone watching from YouTube. And so the question, it's quite long, but I'm going to just read it, and then if you can just give your answer. So the question is there a line between godly grief and just feeling sorry for myself? If so, what would the line be? And could you suggest any tips on how to grieve without playing the victim game?
Okay, Tyron. So loss is normal. God didn't say, as Bruce mentioned earlier, we being Christian doesn't mean that we're going to be absolved of grief and loss. So we have to accept that as normal. But we can't make grief our identity. And that's when we become a sort of victim. So we walk around with a sad face. We talk about what we've lost all the time. We sort of ruminate over and over and over and over on that. But on the other hand, as I said earlier, we can't be a cherub on a cloud plucking a harp. We've got to be realistic. So we've got to verbalize what we feel. We can share what we feel with God and with our friends or our family. And then we can make certain plans to get through it. But sometimes it sucks, as I said. This is bad, but we can't let it overwhelm us. And we need to broaden our outlook on life and look for other ways of feeling better. I remember during that hard lockdown, we had the most beautiful, beautiful weather. And I just thought God is like really blessing us in this time with this beautiful weather. So we're going to need to shift our focus and look somewhere else. And find joy in other things. That doesn't mean that we're ignoring the pain, but we can find joy somewhere else. And I think we need to focus on that, sort of work hard at that, and let other people see that, and we inspire other people along the way by doing that, and then they bring us joy again as well.
Now, this next question actually ties into the exact question that you just answered. Now, interestingly, this question just got asked on our live chat and was one of the most asked for questions on the poll. It was in the top 5. And the question is what are the signs that I've handled the loss well and am living beyond it? And so that was from the poll. And then the question in the chat was the same. How do you know when you have successfully dealt with your grief or loss of a loved one?
Okay, well, first of all, there's going to be no end to this. There's going to be no like finite, boom, it's over. Obviously, there will be gradual release of lockdown, but the effects of us we won't wake up one day and the world will be reset. We'll be in a different place. It'll be a new normal, and gradually we will find that we are able to hug people and so on. So I don't think we can't live sort of waiting for that day, because we've actually got to sit in the hole and make and be happy with where we are. So I think if we go to bed every night and we think, okay, how did today go? We can reflect on that, and we can look back and see, how many times did I lose my temper? Did I shout at people in the traffic? Did I manage to get through everything that I wanted to do today? So I think it's just monitoring yourself and looking at how you're doing. And that what's very important is to not beat yourself up. So if you had a bad day, if things didn't work out, you can't feel like you're a total failure and now you're just going to give up altogether. We've actually, God's blessings on you, mercies on you every morning. We have to get up and we have to do it again. And we have to do it again and do it again and do it again. And that's how life is. And we've got to ask God for help, and we've got to celebrate the victories. When we manage to keep it all together, we've got to celebrate that. And when we fail, we've got to ask for forgiveness, and we've to the people that we've upset, and to God, and then we've got to move on, and we've got to move on victoriously. We've got to live victoriously. I think that's so important.
Thanks for that, Julia. Now, sorry, go for it, Bruce.
I just want to make this point: is you never get over loss. You learn to live beyond loss. And the difference is you turn a wound into a scar. Jesus had the wounds of the nails in his hands, but when they became scars, they became his testimony. He said to Thomas, "Look at my scars." So we're not trying to get over losses. We're not trying to forget about them. We're trying to process them correctly so that the wound becomes a scar. And you are over a loss when you are able to point to the scar, tell the story, but not feel the agony and pain of it anymore. And that's that. I mean, anybody who's got a scar on their body, you can tell your child or your grandchild the story. Look at this scar. Look, and you tell the story, but it no longer builds up. If it's an unresolved loss, it is still a wound. And if it is left and not cleansed, it becomes infected, and you lose the capacity of your arm or wherever it is. It's the same thing with loss. If it's unresolved, it continues to be a wound, and you will lose a certain amount of your capacity in whatever way. So you're over it when it's a scar. You can still tell the story, but it doesn't bring up the emotional content that comes with it.
Thanks for adding that, Bruce. Now, Julia, I want to go back to you for a moment, and just to change direction quickly. We've had a lot of parents obviously answer this poll, and specifically their heart is around their kids and their children and how to deal with their kids' loss. Now, if you could just maybe make a whole comment on the subject of how can I help my kids process their loss as well, and how can I use this season to empower my child in that context. If you could just make a comment combining the whole thought process of parents and their kids in this season.
Okay, so the one important thing to note about children is that they're not like adults in that they carry their loss with them all the time. So if we faced a loss, it dictates our whole day, or we carry it through our whole day. Children move in and out of loss. So they are processing loss, but they can go out and jump on the trampoline and have a complete blast and not think about it at all. And you might think, oh, my child's fine. And in that moment, your child is fine. But 5 minutes later, they might be in tears again. So they move in and out. And it's important for us as parents to be aware of that and to not sort of try and address their loss when they're jumping on the trampoline, but to be available for them when they are processing that loss. So when we need to create a space where they can ask us questions, where they can actually verbalize their discomfort or their anxiety. That's where we need to look after ourselves, and we need to be, not sit up and watch Netflix all night, but get enough sleep and have enough energy so that we can be there for them. But then at the same time, we can't beat ourselves up when we missed a cue. You suddenly realize, oh gosh, my child asked me a question and I totally ignored him, and now I'm a terrible parent because I wasn't there for them. So we can also get through that by engaging with them regularly, every night, maybe reading them a story or lying with them at night, or driving in the car, or just creating a quiet space, a safe space for them to be able to verbalize. But we can't sit our children down and say, right, it's 2:00 now, I'm going to ask you these 5 questions, what are the answers? That's not going to work. So we actually have to be a little bit flexible in that. But I think what's important is that we need to we don't have the answers to every question. We don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how this is going to pan out. But we can say, we've got you. We've got you in this. We will do this. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are going to walk through this together, and it will be fine. And God's got this, and we're going to trust God in this. And you can help them interact with God in a way. And also do therapeutic things like, I've seen lots of families going for walks together, or just doing things together that we don't all sort of isolate ourselves and keep, hanging up the washing and making food and getting through the day. That actually sometimes we can just stop that and just play a silly game of cards or just do something nice. And we can also use animals and so on to sort of our pets and whatever to interact with them, but just sort of be mindful of their behavior. If their behavior is anywhere different to where they normally, so if they're normally very loud and bouncy and they suddenly become quiet, or they're normally quiet and they suddenly become angry and slam the door, kick the cat, then we need to think about that. And then that's when we could sort of push into that behavior and sort of say to them, how are you doing today? And not be judgmental or critical, but be open to that. So it means we have to sort of be open and flexible to them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, we have another question from someone watching, and the question is the following. And Bruce, if I could ask both you and Julia to answer this. Bruce, if you could go first, and then Julia, if you want to add anything on top of that, please. And the question is, after accepting that loss has occurred, accepting that I must move on, is there a place in this new journey to also reflect on questions like, what led to this loss? And is there anything I could have done differently? Now, I suppose that's the bargaining part of the stages of grief and stuff. But Bruce, if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, I really strongly feel that in our periods of loss and periods when things are a struggle, that we often are able to connect and to hear things from God in ways that you'll never hear when things are going well. So I do really believe that anything that we go through in life needs to be processed through. And even a level of depression can bring great treasures. There's an incredible scripture that I wanted to highlight that comes from Isaiah 45. It says, I will give you the treasures of darkness, riches hidden in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summons you by name. And there's some really important promise in that. I will give you the treasures of darkness. In other words, in darkness, in loss, there are also treasures. And we kind of sometimes, when we go through this thing, we just think everything is dark and there's nothing good in it. And that helps us dig the hole deeper. In times like that, it's really important to go to this scripture and just to underline the fact, I will give you the treasures of darkness, riches hidden in secret places. And sometimes in loss, you will find riches that are hidden in secret places during this time. So this verse means a lot to me, is that when I'm feeling different emotions and what have you, I kind of say, well, God, I feel this, but I know there's a hidden treasure here. There's a secret here. And that kind of keeps me searching for what I can learn. Could I have done it better? Did I get myself into this? Is it circumstantial? whatever the reasons are, God, what man or circumstances intend for evil, God can turn for good. There are hidden riches there. There are treasures, and your mindset and your searching and your discussions with people can draw out incredible treasures from those kind of situations.
Julia, do you want to add anything to that? Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I got it. So we can kill ourselves with if only. If only I'd done this earlier, if only I'd spoken about, if only I'd made this choice, not that choice. We can kill ourselves with that. And I think we've got to realize or remember that God is in all of it. He knew, sometimes we wonder which decision God wants us to make. He knew we were going to make. He knew what was going to happen. He's in there, and he's in there now. So we can't beat ourselves up about that. We also can't try and figure out God. If God is so much bigger and more powerful than us, we can't figure him out. And so we need to leave that to God. If we could figure him out, he wouldn't be worth being our God. And we need to rest in that. We need to say, okay, God, well, here I am. And, I agree with all Bruce said. It's a beautiful scripture. But, we're never going to be glad about COVID. We're never going to be glad about any of the losses that we've suffered. But one day we're going to look back and see what we've learned and what we've gained within that time. And so we need to realize, and that should give us hope that this is going to, that we are becoming better people, and not better people necessarily for everybody else, which we will be, but better for ourselves. Our joy will increase. Our capacity for joy will increase because of what we've been through, the pain that we've been through.
Thanks for that insight. Now, I want to just move to a more spiritual direction on the whole thing. And Bruce, in the poll that went out, there was a topic called My Spiritual Life. And the two most asked for questions, and if you can answer both of these, was number one, how do I keep growing spiritually in the Lord? And number two is, I'm struggling to engage in my devotional life, was the comment. And I just want to wrap that into the context that Julia started with, was that we've lost routine. Like we've all felt lost, and one of the big losses that we're all going through is routine. So if you can just comment on that.
Yeah, sure. Again, my pattern of dealing with anything in my own life is to just try and figure out where you find this in the scripture and then draw from that. And the guide to look to in this case is David, the life of David. And the book of Psalms, you really need to get this, the book of Psalms contains every single human emotion possible. You cannot find a human emotion that's not in the book of Psalms. And so one of the ways to process through a season where your devotional life is struggling and your emotions are very heightened, which is generally why we struggle with our devotional life, either our mind or our emotions have become bigger than our spirit in that time. And we have to find a way of just processing through whatever's in our minds or processing through what's in our emotions. And when we can bring those back into order and allow our spirit to be dominant in our life again, the devotional life will come back. So when somebody's struggling devotionally, it generally means that something emotional or something in their minds has taken dominance over their spirit. Now, if it's loss, it's often an emotional situation, and that's where you turn to the Psalms. And the secret is to read the Psalms until you find one that really speaks to you. And here's the second part of that journey, is that in that Psalm that you find will also be the key to the way out. And you just read that Psalm until you find the key to the way out. And then you start to live into that key. And that'll bring back the divine order where our spirits are dominant over our mind and our emotions, and we can connect again. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. And so in my own journey and in many other people's journeys, there's sometimes a season where you just have to pull back and focus on the Psalms, focus on worship music and the Psalms. You may not even get further than that, especially if you've been through a really difficult loss. The Psalms may be all you can do, or just worship music. And then slowly as those Psalms speak to you and bring bring reasonableness to the loss again, your spirit life just starts to restore. But may I just say one thing, that over my own journey in the role that I have, the one thing that has to be worked through is the role of questions. Is there are some questions that have no answers. And sometimes it's not worth asking why. It's better to have no answer at all than to have a half-baked answer. And somewhere you will have to deal with the thing of what are you going to do about the questions that keep rising up, and make peace with them. Because as long as those questions keep rising up, your own devotional life will struggle. But there are some questions that will only be answered in heaven, in eternity, not on earth. And those questions can really rob you of spiritual life until you come to the point of realizing that it's not that you say, well, there is no answer. You can just say, I will have to wait for another season in my life when I get the full answer to that. And I am prepared to live with mystery. So if you take this combination of things that I've just shared over a period of time, your devotional life can find a new space. It won't go back to the same. It never goes backward. It always goes forward. And you will find new treasures in some of your journey. So I hope that helps a bit, Julia.
That helps.
I think Bruce.
So I want to sorry. I want to just ask a question quick on the section of grieving loss takes on various forms, the stages of grief. And we asked the question out as, I would like to know more about one of the following stages. And the most popular of that, Julia, if you can just touch on this topic that people would like to know more about, is accepting. And then interestingly, and also anger and outbursts. I think in this lockdown season, we all carry a bit of irritation and irritability amongst us, and we don't know why. But are we just dealing with the anger stage of the loss?
Yeah, there's typically 5 stages of grief, and we move through them at different stages, and then we eventually get to acceptance, and then we go back again, and eventually we always end up, we're aiming for acceptance. So the other ones are what we deal with on the way. So anger is a very normal reaction to loss, and I think we are angry now because a lot of our freedom has been taken away, and we know we didn't do anything to deserve it. We feel like, and in this world that we live in, where we have technology, and we're always aiming at the zero defect. We're trying to eliminate all problems by solving it with technology, and our cars drive faster, and they're now automatic. You don't even have to change a gear. Now Siri will do everything for you. So I think anger is a normal reaction to that sort of modern way of zero defect, and so we don't accept. If you get sick, you must get a pill, and then you must get better. And if the car breaks down, you take it to the mechanic, and he fixes it. So anger is normal. Anger is also a normal emotion. It's something, emotions were planted in us by God, and so anger is a normal emotion. Even Jesus got angry in the temple. So we mustn't feel bad. As soon as we feel bad about being angry, well, then we've got 2 emotions to deal with rather than the first one. It's what we do with our anger that's a problem. So we can't kick the cat or slam the door or shout at our friend or raise our fist, as we get stuck in the traffic. We've got to do something positive with that anger. So, and I think that's why it's important to monitor our emotions. I'm going through a thing at the moment where at the end of every day, I think about what emotions did I feel today, and then I pray into that emotion. Why did I feel that emotion? And then I pray into that. So why did I feel angry? Did the person cut in front of me? Was it unfair that lady shouted at Bruce in the queue in Pick and Pay? He could get angry at that, but then he can also understand it and go, mercy and grace. It's okay. I don't have to feel that. We can go through that process, or we can do something like, I am really angry that I've been so curtailed. My whole life is so curtailed. Then we need to go for a run. Then we need to do something that will exorcise that anger rather than using it in a negative way. So anger is something that we see as negative, but we can use it to positive. And if we're really angry about people without food and people with no jobs, well, then go and join Enrique and go and feed people. Go and do something positive with that. I mean, make sandwiches. Pay money into something, or do something active, proactive to help that anger. And then with acceptance, I think, so we've got to realize we move in and out of acceptance. We might have a good day and we feel like, I'm handling this fine. I've got this, I've had Zoom meetings and my business is going okay. My children, everything is fine. And so now we're in acceptance. But then the next day, something terrible happens, like our geyser burst, and then you think, it's not working. Or, something that you planned for, you planned for and you did everything right, and then it didn't work. And then you find yourself, and then you think, oh gosh, I'm not at acceptance. I'm actually still in anger, or I'm still bargaining, or I'm still depressed, or whatever. And then it's important not to beat yourself up about it, but to start again, recalibrate, take a deep breath, soothe yourself, and get going again.
So in conclusion now for this whole topic, Julia, if you had to sum up how we handle loss in a few bullet points, what would you say to us?
Okay, so one of the most useful things I've ever said to anybody, many people tell me this when they're dealing with loss, is do the next thing. And that sounds like such a simple and useless statement, but to do the next thing means that when we get overwhelmed by the whole situation, I mean, we can get overwhelmed by our personal situation, about this global situation, and it can just completely paralyze us. The most important thing is to do the next thing. And do the next thing could be making a cup of tea, could be getting out of bed, it could be having a shower, but it could also be a bigger thing, making that phone call, or signing that deal, or selling something, or but it's just the next thing. And if we do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, eventually we get to the end. So that's important. The second thing is to store memories. So this time of COVID lockdown is very trying, and we don't know when it's going to end. But it's important that we make memories as we're doing this. A lot of us have had birthdays during this time, and these birthdays, some of them will be very memorable because people went out of their way to reach out to us, and that's a memory. There's many different things that we can do. I mean, I even know of a lady who's doing lockdown photo shoots. She's a photographer who's got no work, but she does lockdown photos. So she goes to your house and you all stand outside with your mask, and she takes a photo. And, one day we're going to show that to our grandchildren. So that's like kind of a nice thing, a proactive thing to do. And then, as I've mentioned before, it's important to monitor yourself. What have you lost? Can you live without it? If not, how can I make up for it? So you miss your friends and you can't meet them physically. So like the question that we got about being hugged, you're not going to get a hug. So it's no use beating yourself up about the fact, or being angry about the fact that you haven't got a hug. You've got to do something else. So you've got to hug your pet or get a pet, or you've got to find another way to interact with people that gives you the same re-reward. Doing other things like finding an online course to do, finding a new hobby, re-engaging with some of your family in a different way. Like my old matric class. I mean, I was in matric very long ago, and some of us have re-engaged in that way. And then fourthly, we need to embrace the discomfort. And we need to use that as a lever to get out of our comfort zone and to find new pathways. So, the Sanson and Lloyd will tell you that I hate coffee out of a paper cup. And that's my thing. I like to have a proper cup to drink proper coffee. But, if I went on and on about that, well, then I'd miss out on a lot of opportunities now. So we can't go out. We can go out, but we couldn't go to restaurants. So I'm putting up with drinking coffee in a paper cup and sitting on a cold cement step so that I can talk to my friend. So we need to embrace that discomfort. It's more important for me to engage with my friend and to reach out to her, but also to get her reaching into me, than the fact that I can't have coffee the way I like it. So we need to broaden our standards. I don't think that's lowering our standards, but I think we need to broaden our standards, and we need to look around and see. I mean, you know, we can't go out to restaurants. We can't do, there's lots of things we can't do, but we need to look at what we can do and make the most of that. And then we need to get God involved. We need to have regular quiet times. We need to be honest with God. So we've been talking a lot about reading the Psalms and so on. And I think we need to be honest with God and move through the day with God with us, talking to him and sharing with him how we're feeling, and asking him, what would Jesus do? How would you, God, where are you in this situation? And if you ask him where he is, you will find him. You know, I think sometimes we think we're too scared to ask that question. And then, of course, get family and friends involved. Be honest. Don't pretend that you're okay if you're not okay. Admit that you're not okay, and give some people a heads up as to what is wrong, so that we can actually address that. And then it's important to remember that you sow what you reap. So if you have felt so depressed and you've locked yourself in a hole, and you haven't contacted anybody, and you've ignored the phone, and you've ignored people that have tried to reach out to you, eventually they will stop calling. And so that's a problem, because then one day when you are ready to reach out, then you don't have any friends anymore. So it's important to remember that you're sowing for a harvest. So sometimes when you don't feel like doing things, you need to do them anyway. And we can't be governed by our emotions. We need to be governed by the principles of God, and we need to live our lives victoriously and keep sowing in, and think at the end of every day, what have I done today? And to reach out that way. And then people will reach into you, and they will bless you.
Thank you for that. Those practical bullet points there was excellent. Now, Bruce, if you were just to conclude your side, what would you say to sum this whole thing up?
Well, first of all, just to thank Julia for those points, and Catherine will send them out to everybody straight after this Zoom course, so that you've got them just to review. I think the way I would like to finish off is just saying loss and how we deal with it is God's megaphone to our hearts. And C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, says this: we can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pains or loss. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And so I just want to say to everybody is that, yeah, this is a period of loss for many. There is pain involved in this, but it's part of this is also God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world, not only individually, but corporately as well. So engage it, engage God, dig deep. And God uses it for our good and for his glory. And as you engage it and you surrender to the peace which passes understanding, you'll find him present there. But keep walking through the shadows to the other side. God is in that.
Thanks, Bruce. And what I'm hearing here is, from everything, is just don't walk alone. You know, this can be a season of great spiritual, mental, and character growth. And we mustn't miss the opportunity in this season for that growth. You know, talk to your cell groups, talk to your friends, and Family Center has some help available to us. Bruce, if you can just quickly share with us some information on how Family Center can help.
Thanks, Tyron. Family Center Durbanville was established at El Shaddai to bring hope to people and healing in this season. And there's a number of ways in which that can happen. You'll see them on your screen. There is grief counseling. Julia has spearheaded that and helped us put that in place over the past 12 years for people who've lost a loved one, that they're able to turn those wounds into healthy scars. There's a grief share course, which is an internationally based course with best practice experts helping people through the process. So if you've lost a loved one or you're experiencing loss, no matter how long ago, that's available through the Family Center. There are also counselors who are able to handle trauma or traumatic experiences and the impact that it's had on you. Plus, there's a whole lot of counselors who are able to listen to you for any reason whatsoever. The information is on the screen right now. You can email them or look at their website. But other than dealing with loss and grief, there's other help available for people struggling and needing marriage counseling, where we have people who can help you through that. There's also marriage course that's available online. And our marriage courses aren't just for struggling marriages, they're also for marriage enrichment. We'd far rather you enriched your marriage, and maybe in this season you want to do something online. If this COVID period has brought you a lot of financial challenges, we're able to refer you to people who can assist you with resetting budgets or putting practical guidelines in place so that you can better manage your finances. And Toby Verain from Family Foundations International runs a financial freedom course, which I would highly recommend. And this is what's available to you if you need help beyond anything that we've said, or maybe this discussion today has raised stuff within you and you need to just talk it through. Please make use of that email address to get hold of Sonia, or go and have a look at our website as well. But don't leave it. There are people who will walk with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Julia, and thank you to everyone who's just participated in all this. And I really believe and trust that what was spoken about today and everything that was answered has been really helpful and just blessed you guys. It's blessed me just listening as well. So I just want to say thanks again to everyone involved. And yeah, have a great day and let God be with you in this season. Bye.